Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Happy Friday, everybody. I hope you had a productive week, and I wish you all a restful weekend ahead. Just a piece of housekeeping at the beginning of the episode: there may not be an episode tomorrow. I will try to get one out, but I will be travelling and there's a possibility I won't be able to make it. Now for the episode, and we begin in the South China Sea. In an exclusive report published yesterday, UK-based Reuters writes that the US's Typhoon mid-range missile system is still in the Philippines, a development which appears to have angered, or perhaps frightened, Beijing officials. The outlet reports, citing unnamed sources, that the United States has no immediate plans to withdraw the mid-range missile system deployed in the Philippines despite Chinese demands, and is testing the feasibility of its use in a regional conflict. The Typhoon system, which can be equipped with cruise missiles capable of striking Chinese targets, was brought in for joint exercises earlier this year, but they have remained there. Philippine officials said Filipino and US forces continue to train with the missile system, which is on the northern island of Luzon, facing the South China Sea and close to the Taiwan Strait. They said they were not aware of immediate plans to return it, even though the joint exercises end this month. China has denounced the deployment of the Typhoon several times, including in May when Wu Qian, spokesperson for China's defense ministry, said Manila and Washington had brought, quote, huge risks of war into the region, end quote. Zhang Xiaogang, spokesperson for China's Ministry of National Defense, in July, urged the US and the Philippines to immediately withdraw the Typhoon missile system and never deploy it again. Zhang said that the system is, quote, a strategic offensive weapon reminiscent of the Cold War, end quote, and should never have been deployed to the region, noting that, quote, forcing its allies and partners into the US war chariot will only lead to tensions and confrontation, end quote. Of course, this comes as tensions between Beijing and Manila have reached boiling point in recent months, with several incidents of alleged Chinese ramming of Philippine vessels around contested shoals in the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Beijing is right to be concerned, as Matt Turpin, a visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution, specializing in U.S. policy towards the People's Republic of China, expressed in a piece this week, quote, during the 1991 Gulf War, the United States had complete air dominance over Iraq and the most advanced surveillance technology at the time, and it still proved extremely difficult to find and destroy Iraq's truck-mounted Scud missiles driving around the open desert. And the Scud looked distinctive, not like one in several 100 million shipping containers. Now imagine the PLA's challenge today. They would need to find trucks in the jungles of the islands of the Western Pacific, as well as distinguish additional TELs from millions of 40-foot shipping containers, while simultaneously facing a contested airspace and contested maritime space for their surveillance and weapons systems in order to effectively find and target the Typhoon battery, end quote. Next up, yesterday we covered the tragic death of a 10-year-old Japanese child stabbed by a middle-aged Chinese man while walking to his Japanese school in the South Chinese megacity of Shenzhen. As the second such incident of Japanese school children being targeted in recent months, this case has sparked conversations about a potential exodus of Japanese businesses and nationals from China, as well as the debate surrounding rising Chinese nationalism. The Japanese Consul General in Guangzhou, Kajima Yoshiko, revealed early Thursday that the boy, who was a Japanese citizen with a Japanese father and Chinese mother, died before dawn at the hospital where he had been receiving treatment. Kajima said the boy had been stabbed in the abdomen, adding that Chinese authorities will determine the exact cause of his death. She said she wants Chinese authorities to continue to safeguard Japanese nationals in the country. In response to the latest deadly attack, the Japanese Chamber of Commerce issued a statement on Wednesday saying it takes the incident extremely seriously. Koroji Ichiro, a professor at Kanda University of International Studies, says investments in China, which are already decreasing, will be affected by the incident. He also says it will impact Japanese tourism. Japanese schools in China emerged as a target of anti-Japan sentiment last year after Beijing accused Tokyo of treating the Pacific as a sewer by releasing water from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant into the sea. The releases were approved by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which noted that the radioactive content was similar to or less than what other countries with nuclear power plants discharge. We covered this at the time. When rocks and eggs were thrown at Japanese schools in 2 Chinese cities at the time, Beijing said Japan's actions had led to the incidents. US-based The Wall Street Journal reports today that days before Wednesday's attack in Shenzhen, a video surfaced on Tencent's WeChat platform showing the city's Japanese school and calling on the local police to expel it from China. Quote, a similar script can be found in many clips on Chinese video streaming sites, suggesting that Japanese schools in China breed spies and often calling the schools the new colonies, a description intended to invoke Japan's occupation of China in the years following the 1931 invasion. End quote. About 102,000 Japanese people were living in mainland China as of 2023, and there are 11 full-time Japanese schools in the country, according to Japan. Meanwhile, there are over 821,000 Chinese nationals living in Japan, making them the largest group of immigrants in the country. And the number of Japanese in China is declining. The number of Japanese nationals living in China reached a 2-decade low in 2022 as relations between the two nations faced multiple headwinds. The number of Japanese residents in China peaked in 2012, with the biggest drop in 2013 because of a nationwide anti-Japanese protest in China over the Senkaku Islands, known in Chinese as the Diaoyu. Since then, the number of Japanese in China has continued to shrink, with decreasing Japanese investment too. Almost half of all Japanese firms in China, polled recently by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, which is based in London, said they will not spend more or cut investment this year, citing rising wages, falling prices, and geopolitical tensions. Robert Ward, Director of Geopolitics and Strategy at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, expressed on the findings, quote, "We are now past Japan's peak economic engagement with China." End quote. China took less than 18% of Japan's exports last year, the lowest level since 2015, with values slipping almost 7% compared with double-digit growth to the US and European Union. As a result, the US overtook China as Japan's largest export market for the first time in 4 years. There were around 31,000 Japanese companies in China last year, according to Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, down by about a tenth from 2020. Over the same period, some 4,000 firms set up offices elsewhere in the world. Florian Schneider, chief professor of modern China at Leiden University, expressed in a piece this week that, quote, "Chinese authorities have certainly normalized nationalism as the correct way to understand the world. What citizens then do with that understanding is not up to any individual leader, and it can backfire, sometimes spectacularly so." End quote. While nationalism might have provided a catalyst for the recent outbursts, Schneider cautions, quote, "The roots are likely much deeper, tying in with broader social and economic anxieties." End quote. Indeed, as we have recently discussed, China's property slump has wiped some $18 trillion in wealth from households, according to a Barclays report, and triggered pay cuts and layoffs as the nation wrestles with its longest period of deflation in decades. The stock market has seen close to $6 trillion in wealth wiped out as well. This has hit households especially hard. However, some argue it's hate, not economics, that is fueling all of this violence. On Thursday, Li Jinxing, a Chinese lawyer who lives in Tokyo, joined a group of Chinese living in the city to organize a vigil to mourn the boy killed in Shenzhen. Speaking to media at the event, Li expressed, quote, "China wants more foreign investments, and it continues to promote hatred. That contradiction won't work anymore." End quote. Some Chinese commentators have brushed the incident off, however. Professor of International Relations and outspoken nationalist Shi Yinghong at Renmin University in Beijing wrote online that this murder, quote, "is a very small and incidental event as far as the broader Sino-Japanese relationship is concerned. It reflects at the most the bad state of feelings held by Chinese and Japanese people towards each other." End quote. Next up, we have one more development to cover, but just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode, as always, I have a huge favor to ask. That is just to hit the like button, and if you're a regular viewer and you have not done so already, maybe consider subscribing. If you think you are already subscribed, YouTube unfortunately recently has been unsubscribing people, so it may be worth checking this now. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable. Thank you so much. Next up and finally for today, Substack publication Drop Site News, an outlet started recently by journalists from US-based The Intercept, this week published a report claiming that Pakistan has offered China a military base at Gwadar. If accurate, this would be a big deal. The report says that they have viewed a, quote, collection of highly confidential internal strategic assessments, reports and diplomatic cables produced between 2023 and 2024, which were provided to Drop Site by sources within the Pakistani security establishment and backed up by interviews with sources with direct knowledge of the government's internal affairs, end quote, which show that, quote, Pakistani officials have become increasingly frantic in their efforts to repair relations with China, including, as the documents reveal, by granting China approval for a military base at the port of Gwadar, a major and long-standing strategic demand of Beijing, and authorizing joint military operations inside Pakistan, end quote. Now, we do not know how accurate this report is, but it is certainly worth taking note of. So to end today's video, we will examine some of the long report, which we're now quoting selected excerpts from directly. Beijing's ambitions for Gwadar have long concerned Washington. Gwadar lies at the mouth of the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz, on the shore of the Arabian Sea. A military base there would transform China's ability to project force beyond its own region and free it from the dependence on maritime energy shipping routes in Southeast Asia, while undermining Washington's strategy of containment against Beijing. A 2020 report by the U.S. Naval War College highlighted the risk of China turning Gwadar into a strategic strongpoint that would grant it access to the Persian Gulf region in a future war. The report noted that Chinese investment in Gwadar to date does not depend primarily on commercial returns and was strategic in nature. The conclusions mirror U.S. intelligence assessments finding that China has sought to create a network of military and naval bases around the world. The Naval War College report also contained an important caveat. The ability to develop Gwadar into a full-blown strategic hub hinged largely on future decisions by Pakistan's leaders to increase their political commitment to China and allow it to be militarized. If China-India and China-US relations continue to deteriorate rapidly, China may well determine that a confrontational posture is inevitable, the report said. In this case, overt militarization of China's presence at Gwadar, perhaps in response to a terrorist incident or a threat in the Strait of Hormuz, might look appealing, even if it provoked harsh countermeasures, the report added. In 2022, the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee published a report on Chinese influence in South Asia. It noted that Chinese ships had already begun utilizing the port in Gwadar and highlighted the implications for the U.S. of a full-blown future Chinese military presence there. A military base at Gwadar would allow China to maintain a permanent presence in the Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Oman, expanding the naval footprint of its attack submarine and refueling capabilities, the report said. The U.S. Institute of Peace report from 2023 also noted that the political barriers to establishing a base there for China were surmountable and diminishing over time. It also noted the massive strategic benefits to the Chinese Navy of having a presence at Gwadar in the event of a major war, including the ability to launch retaliatory blockades against U.S. shipping and energy interests in the Middle East. The PRC and Pakistan have a long-standing relationship. We do not ask Pakistan or any country to choose between the United States and the PRC, the U.S. State Department said in a statement provided after publication, noting that it couldn't comment on reported classified documents or comments by unnamed sources. The information reviewed by Drop Site does not indicate whether concrete steps have yet been taken to move forward with the militarization of Gwadar, a move that would likely poison Pakistan's future ties with the US, while antagonizing many inside Pakistan who would object to a perceived sacrifice of the country's sovereignty. Here ends the direct quote and today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Friday, have a restful weekend, and I will either see you tomorrow, Saturday, or on Monday.